Welcome to the Anxiety Relief Summit, where you will find holistic and practical solutions you can start taking today to break free from the worry spirals, regain your peace of mind, and confidence to take action on the things that matter most. Hi, I'm your summit host, Laura Levitt, and the information provided in this summit is not a substitute for counseling or medical advice. The information presented here is meant to inspire and educate listeners, but are not guarantees of any kind. I'm so glad you're here, and let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Today we have a wonderful guest for you, Aditi. Hi, welcome.
Thank you so much, Laura, for inviting me. It's an honor, and I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. It is a pleasure. Let us tell the audience a little bit about you, and then we can start talking.
Absolutely.
All right. Aditi Jasra is a registered clinical counselor and a Canadian certified counselor with a master's in counseling psychology. She's the founder of For Wellness North Counseling Clinic. It's a mental health practice, which is an all-female, person of color-led, multilingual team of master-level clinicians serving communities in the British Columbia, Canada area. As a psychotherapist, her work involves supporting folks who struggle with various roadblocks to mental well-being, and anxiety is one of them. She uses EMDR, EFT, and CBT and somatic approaches to assist people and her community. She's also certified as a yoga teacher and mindfulness facilitator for almost a decade now, and she strongly believes in the healing power of movement. So I'm excited to hear about all of that. So again, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for a kind introduction.
Tell us a little bit about you and your journey, how you got into the work that you're doing.
Definitely. I started out about a decade ago in field of mindfulness, some lived experiences, Laura, as well as demand of the community. I was always very connected to yoga, never pursued it as a career, but once my second child was born, whose special needs, that led me into that path of, my own healing journey and then connecting with the community as I led those programs. Through various organizations in Alberta and BC, I was very drawn to people's stories. And that's how I ended up doing my master's in counseling psychology to gather more tools to support folks who were connecting with me. And here we are, almost a decade later. And I feel that, being a helper, healer, it's an honor, right? Like it's a calling almost. And you automatically feel drawn to it, right? Like, so I'm very happy with what I do, and every day is a gift. I get to learn from people I support, and it's a journey. And we are on this journey along with them to support them in where they want to go.
And our clients can teach us so much, right? It's just constant learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tell us what some of the common patterns and cognitive distortions are associated with anxiety and how individuals can start to overcome them.
Absolutely. As somatic practitioner, Laura, I feel that a lot of times when we look at psychology, we think of cognition, thought processes, and we are working on challenging these thoughts in order to change certain patterns that we might have developed. I personally think that has a place. It can work very well with some folks, but we want to integrate some of these additional healing modalities in order to break these patterns, because mind is powerful. It has developed these patterns for some reason. Anxiety is actually inner wiring. It is inbuilt. Back in the day, if we look at the evolution, caveman days, anxiety was there because if there was no anxiety, no one is watching the cave, we are all sleeping, lion is going to come in and it's going to eat us all. So anxiety was there. We had to be ready for the storm that is about to come. We have to have extra stones, trees, whatever it is that we need to protect our tribe from being caught up in the flood. So that's where I think somatic practices are really helpful, because we look at bottom-up approaches. What's happening in the body when you're anxious? Someone might say, I feel something in my belly. And the funny thing is the neural pathway for anxiety and excitement is the same. And that's the cognitive restructuring Should I think of it as this is exciting, or should I think of it as this is nerve-wracking, right? How are we going to deal with it? If we work with the body, it will give us so much more freedom to navigate the challenge, in the sense that the feedback is instant. So I know I'm anxious, my heart is beating fast, and if I can just take a breath and slow down, the result will be instantaneous, versus me telling myself, you've got this summit with Laura, don't be anxious, it's going to be great. It's going to take a little bit of a time, right? And these seeds are planted in our childhood. A lot of it has to do with how our mother's pregnancy was, that DNA component, how we were raised, what were the messages we got growing up, and it all gets intertwined. And then we turn into this adult who might take anxiety into their stride, use it to their advantage, or feel stuck when the anxiety comes.
Mm-hmm. That's true. We develop these patterns in the womb and genetics, and then carry that on through everything that we've experienced and learned and thought and incorporated, and all our traumas and everything else all through life. So we do need to have a really large look at all the different areas. Everybody's unique, right? What's causing their anxiety and what their life experiences are. So absolutely. Yeah, looking at the body, looking at mindset, all really important tools. So tell us what the role of emotions are in anxiety.
Absolutely. So when the anxiety comes, what is it that I feel? Is it the fear? Is it I'm anxious because lots riding on this summit, on this exam? I'm anxious about driving test. So that is the cognition. And then when there is a certain thought that I'm going to fail, then there is a certain emotion. Now there is fear, or I'm angry if I don't get good marks in my exam, right? So there is all these emotions attached to the cognition, what we are thinking, and then with the body, right? So typically with anxiety, the emotion is, fear, or if I'm anxious and I needed to move that anxiety, it didn't get moved through my body, then there is that feeling of I feel frozen. So it can manifest in form of different emotions for sure, but we are looking at the whole spectrum. We've got primary emotions, we get our secondary emotions, and we want to examine them all to figure out roots of our anxiety. And when we are working with someone, we are using that biopsychosocial model, what's happening biologically, psychologically, and at social level.
True. All three of those areas, super important. So the body does respond to anxiety, and we can't help but notice that. Sometimes people don't notice their anxiety or have any kind of need to kind of dive in and look at correcting things until it shows up in the body, till they start having, health problems and inability to really function well, right?
Yes. And some of these things we typically notice psychosomatically. People cannot sleep, they are too anxious, or they are overthinkers, they're thinking all the time. Now they are stuck in that sympathetic mode, which becomes maladaptive. When I'm always wired, I'm tired, but I cannot sleep. So that wired but tired symptom starts to exist. Sometimes we get stuck in analysis paralysis. I want everything to be perfect. I'm thinking, and things never get done because I want them to be, absolutely perfect. So it can affect us in so many different ways, and everyone's anxiety looks different. Why it shows up could be very different. But what is common is that we are all humans. And if it's manifesting in the body, doing something with the body can really help the anxiety. But it's a matter of practice, consistency, and using the right tools. So if you're a fish, you need to work in the water. If you're a monkey, you need to work with the trees. So it's like who you are and how is your anxiety holding you back, and what do we know based on neuroscience, based on emotions and cognitions, and that's how we want to deal with it.
So do you suggest, everybody should find something that they can use to calm down and find a little bit of a balance regularly, like sitting in the hot tub, going to the gym, but something that works for one person isn't going to be the same for another person. Absolutely. So you probably have some good tips when it comes to deep breathing exercises, other kind of relaxation exercises?
So many. But the thing is that when you're anxious, you can't implement those things, right? So in one of the trainings we took back in the day, we were told that if you're anxious and someone says, take a deep breath, you start hyperventilating more, right? So it's like, again, some of us might be able to, depending on where we are on that spectrum, on that continuum, like, is my anxiety 10 out of 10 out of 100, or is it like 100, right? So depending, I might be able to breathe deep, I might not be able to breathe deep. But what I always tell my folks that I'm supporting, is that you need to develop these tools when you're not anxious, when we are in our ventral vagal state. If we can develop these tools when we are actually calm and strengthen those neural pathways, then it becomes really helpful. When I'm anxious, I remember my tool like it's a skill. I know, like, back of my hand, how to eat or brush my teeth, and I can do it. So it's almost like that. That's why it's practice. And when it comes to the body, absolutely, meditation works wonderfully well with folks who are anxious. A body scan, progressive muscle relaxation, gentle movement, any of those tools that can bring us into state of calm, relaxation, parasympathetic, where it's not a collapse state, are really helpful.
Mm-hmm. So important. We can learn, we can read books, we can listen to this summit, but the key here is find something that calls to you and then implement it. That's such an important thing, implementing.
Yeah.
Start little, like start with a few things, add in a few more when it gets easier, right?
Absolutely. And that's what we do. We meet people where they are in our work, in our clinical work. We meet them where they are, and we are not giving them homework. We are actually doing these things with them in the session. So
Nice.
they can see, what does it mean to be regulated? How does being calm in the body feel like? And then, can I take that with me from this one-on-one session and implement in my regular life? And if I'm not able to do it, what are the roadblocks? And then we try to chip away at those roadblocks.
Try something different. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about self-talk when it comes to anxiety and that spiraling worry mind. And
yes. So again, like, we can learn all those tools, techniques, and have them when we are somewhat regulated. The moment we are dysregulated, we cannot talk ourselves out of anxiety. So it has to be that integrative approach where we are looking at the problem from different angles. For a lot of folks, absolutely, CBT can be amazing. But let's do something with the body. I'm anxious. I need to feel safe in the moment. I need to feel I can manage this. So if you're at 5, going back to 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, where there is no anxiety, is much easier. When you've already reached that 10, it's very hard to scale back, right? So again, what you said, small steps. Let's start from there. Self-talk is great. If I'm having a great day and I can build on that and say, I'm amazing and I can do this, I have a win and I celebrate it, that will be great. But when I fall and crash, it's very hard to crawl back up. But again, it depends how hard did I fall, right? Like, am I completely shattered? And if I'm there, like, self-talk is great. I would also love for that social support, people telling me there are instances where you were successful in the past and I'm using them. And coming to self-talk, like, the very reason that we are born, a lot of sperms and eggs were like fighting, and then this one connection happened and I was born. That is a success in itself. So we preserve that. And again, planting those seeds when actually things are going okay is more helpful when we are in that disaster zone. And then trying to do that self-talk, absolutely, it has a place depending on the context. I'm a believer in positive affirmations, but that cannot be the only thing.
Right. So trying to, even if you're conscious and trying to implement the self-talk, you start with something that's very believable when you're in those lower stages, like, I'm alive, I've handled hard things before. And then you try to bring it up to
Absolutely. Yeah. Starting small and like looking at the evidence, what evidence is there that I have been successful, like just graduating from, say, grade 12, right? That could be one. For someone, it could be just having roof over their head, or having 3 meals a day could be a success.
So how can individuals challenge and reframe the anxious beliefs and these irrational fears? What about when they are bad? What are some of the things that they can do? Maybe they're already in a little bit of a downward spiral, like you say, below the 5.
Yeah. I think like when those irrational thoughts come, like I absolutely want to move the body, right? Like before I even challenge the mind, I want to be a little bit more regulated. I want to be in my window of tolerance, because if I'm dysregulated, whether I'm in a hypo-arousal or hyper-arousal, challenging those irrational thoughts is going to be so much more harder. But the thing is that when people connect with, say, counselors, therapists, healers, helpers, they are a little bit regulated. They might not have hope, but they are a little bit regulated. I'm talking to someone, right? I'm not lying in my bed depressed. So we definitely can challenge those thoughts. We look at, we have our entire CBT training where we are challenging the thoughts. We are talking to ourselves like we would talk to our best friend. We are, looking at the evidence. If the evidence says I'm a failure, what is the evidence there? And what does failure actually mean? Right. And we want to develop a little bit more gray as opposed to that black and white thinking. We want to develop mindfulness skills, interpersonal effectiveness. We want to tap into our toolkit and pick the tool that is going to be most helpful given the situation.
So tell us some of the tools that you use the most.
Again, being a body practitioner, I think like tapping into the body is very, very successful. We've had really good results, especially with anxiety. If I know I'm anxious in the moment and I'm overthinking, so first would be adaptive distraction. Distraction, again, you can say it's avoidance, but adaptive distraction. If I cannot look away from my computer screen, being stuck on this one slide, I need to get up, take a little bit of a break, scale back. And then coming into the body, right? Like having a sensory toolkit when I'm actually calm, knowing which song is going to make me feel energized, what's going to help me calm down. That is always good. There can be certain smells that can bring that sense of calm and peace. That association is very strong. Certain people can be very calming because we are social species. So having people around us that are supportive, encouraging can be good. And then, of course, like you said, positive self-talk, looking at the cognitions. What are the stories I tell myself when I'm anxious? And once we know our patterns, when do I feel most anxious? Is it before an exam? Is it every time my boss sends me a message saying, we need to talk? It's like, when do I feel anxious? And then looking at the roots. And but having the toolkit is really helpful. Sensory toolkit in the moment works magically.
So tell us about that one a little bit more.
Yeah.
Sensory toolkit.
Sensory toolkit is like our 5 senses, right? Like it's the things that we should be teaching our kids, which some of us might have gotten those tools, some of us might not have. Coming to our 5 senses and using them to calm ourselves. So what are certain smells that I find soothing? What are certain sights that I find pleasing and comforting? What are certain sounds, auditory stimulus? What are certain tastes that are very comforting for me? So if I'm at 10, having my favorite peppermint tea might not be useful, but if I'm at 5, that might help me. But what happens with that is, Laura, sometimes we start to depend on them so much that we don't implement other things like the cognition. We got to examine those internal stories as well.
Right. So having those thought out ahead of time, taking that time with yourself or a counselor or a coach and thinking those through and having them arranged and prepared and having them already be part of your life, super important. But again, in the moment,
in the senses, right? Like
rely on those.
Something, and that can immediately bring that sense of calm because there is that strong association from the past. And really, anxiety is a kind of energy that needs movement and release. So going for a long hike or run could be really helpful. I would caution though, if you are highly anxious person, and if you're always running, there could be like always buildup of stress hormones. You haven't had time to rest and relax. So we do want to look at that balance. And that's why that biopsychosocial model, looking at a person as a whole, their coping strategies, and if there are none, implementing them. And we start testing these coping strategies when we are somewhat in our window of tolerance.
Right. I see what you're saying there, because a little bit of exercise or a little walk might be just what you need to kind of move that energy and release some stuff. But sometimes people can really get into, I need to pound it at the gym for an hour and a half. And then they're just taking themselves and pushing themselves a little bit harder. And then what's supposed to be nice turns out to just be one more stressor, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And to add to that point, it's like if I find chocolate comforting, and if I'm eating chocolate all day long, after one bar, it's going to become maladaptive. I can't have that 7 days. So
That's
even
right.
a good thing in small doses, right? Sunshine is great, but if you're sitting in the sun all day long, you're going to get a sunburn, right? So it's like balancing things out. And we can only enjoy the sunshine after, thunderstorm. So
Yes.
that's the piece about cognitive flexibility and balance, and, that push and pull of life. Yeah.
I like that. Finding peace and balance are such key words for everything we're talking about today. So tell us a little bit about EMDR.
Absolutely phenomenal. One of our top modalities when it comes to healing from trauma. And, when we say trauma, Laura, it can look so different for people, right? Something traumatizing for me might not be traumatizing for you, right? Like you might be like, I can handle that, right?
Mhm.
Everyone is wired differently. So our traumas, our experiences can be very different. And EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So we are looking at past memories where we feel stuck, and we process them through bilateral stimulation. But it's a 8-phase model where we, of course, intake, assessment, we find targets, and we desensitize those targets. Sometimes these targets could be specific memories, it could be a one-time event, or it could be my relationship with my mom, and all those experiences that were maladaptive, or that left me feeling I'm not good enough, or times when I felt powerless. I want to get to a place where I can feel I'm empowered, or I can take care of myself when, back 20 years ago, no one took care of me. So it's like, where are people stuck and how do we get them unstuck? Lots of research behind it, great supportive community, and it works very well for PTSD, because again, it's not just one thing. It's like combination of different things that we use in this model to support folks.
Mm-hmm. So you can, a lot of the things that we're learning in this summit are really supportive of each other. They don't stand alone. They can all be integrated and used. So that's wonderful. Yeah.
And it's really good when, people are anxious and they are stuck in certain flashbacks or certain narratives, certain thought patterns, and it helps us clear those out. And we can live our, fulfilling life. We can reach our potential.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the goal. We want to feel calmer, and we want to have some of those triggers gone so that we are more resilient.
Absolutely.
So when people have provoking situations, we want to leave them with empowering tools so they have some go-tos.
Yes.
They feel hopeful. And with the world being kind of, scary and uncertain right now, people need lots of extra support and tools. So
Totally. Yeah.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about exposure therapy.
Mm-hmm. Exposure therapy can be really good when, because of anxiety, people develop certain phobias. So exposure, but doing it with lots of resource building, exposing ourselves to a trigger, but not in a way that we get re-traumatized. For example, if someone is uncomfortable taking a train, you live in a suburb, you have to take train to get to downtown, and you're not able to do it, fair. You don't have to take the train, you will start avoiding it. until your perfect job is in downtown and the only way to get there is taking a train. Transit is not an option, or driving is not an option. There's no parking there or whatever else. Now you have no choice but to face that fear. And this fear could be that maybe when I was little, I was on a train, something happened. Now I've developed that phobia of trains. And that's how people develop these phobias of, say, spiders, snakes, slides, planes, heights, whatever it might be. And we live avoiding, I can live my life without taking a plane ever. However, if there is a need to do it, then it's like, oh my God. And one way we can use exposure and, ERP, as we call it, is in a very structured way, exposing ourselves in a small, again, with a professional in small doses, allowing ourselves to feel distress and processing that distress. And then seeing, okay, I can do this. I'm okay. I will be able to handle going on a plane. I don't have to take an 8-hour long plane ride. I can only take half an hour, right? And I can start using mindfulness, visualizing myself taking and noticing what happens in my body as I visualize myself taking this plane ride. What are the messages? Am I thinking I'm going to get stuck, or am I traumatized as a child seeing a movie where plane crashed and now that has affected me? That was traumatizing. So it can be different for different people. And in exposure therapy, we are trying to expose, but in small, controlled way, and then desensitizing it so that people are able to overcome their fear.
Mm-hmm. I find that I've heard and seen a little bit around me where people have wanted to stay home a little bit more than usual since COVID. And, it can be comfortable because it's all about the brain wanting to keep us safe and in the familiar. Yes. So what would you say to somebody who's, staying home more than they should be, whether they're an adult or a teenager who's not wanting to go to school? Right. Exposure therapy, I can see that you're getting them out in little bits at a time where they're comfortable. What else?
Yes. And what happens with that is that we are strengthening that response pathway in the brain that we want to actually break. We are now going to be stuck in the loop, right? Like you stay home one day, now system thinks that's the way to exist. Now the second day it wants to stay home. Third day it wants to stay home. So it's like sometimes we use a technique, we call it self-urging. But we want to break those loops. And that's why, this exposure and response prevention, where I'm exposing myself to the threat. And if my response is continuously washing my hand, I'm preventing myself from that. And again, within reason, within limit. So my exposure to going to school, I want to stay home. And that's how my mind is trying to protect me. I actually have to go to school. I have to take the opposite action in order to break that loop. Again, it's a very systemized method where we are looking at various different steps, where a person is and what can they handle. Mm-hmm. Where we are trying to break that loop. We are looking at, again, cognitions. What am I thinking? The loop is becoming stronger and stronger, and we are finding a spot where we can interject and break that loop.
I like that analogy, the loop. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's perfect. Yeah, so we want to soothe the system, get our system to know that, hey, this is safe doing this little step, but also explaining to people, whether it's an older person or a younger person, the benefits of what they could have opposed to what they're creating for themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. We want to move very slow, depending on where the person is, because sometimes you push them and that could be to re-triggering and re-traumatizing, right? So can I live by keeping my hands dirty for extra, 30 seconds, a minute, and knowing, okay, I'm okay, nothing happened. And then can I go 2 minutes? Instead of like, I had folks who were continuously washing their hands, and after a point, again, that's going to become maladaptive because we do need, and we are also lowering down our threshold for handling, the germs or, with different phobias. Like you said, giving them those tools of like self-soothing, comforting, mindfulness, and those pathways. How do we interject and break this loop?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we want to tell the audience where they can find you. And I think you have a free offer for them as well.
Yes.
And then, have any final words or tips that you want to leave people with, something they can go and do and act on right away? We'll have you leave them with that as well.
Absolutely. I think a really key thing is that when we have certain experiences, we can feel so isolated, so alone. We can feel that we are the only one who's suffering, and our experience might be unique, but someone somewhere has experienced something similar, and that someone was able to overcome it. And so a person who's experiencing something, whether it's anxiety or phobia or some kind of trauma, they should tell themselves that they can do this, whether alone, whether with the help of a supportive professional. They don't have to struggle, right? So reaching out is the hardest step. Taking that first step is the hardest, but there is support. Professionals like you and me are there who are very passionate about this work, because when someone is progressing in their life, that feels good, right? So as much as we are helpers and healers, we love seeing people succeed. So reach out. And they can reach me through our website, Wellness North Counseling. We do have a free offer. We have a simple stress management toolkit for them. They can go to our website, download free ebook, stress management, and have these concrete tools, something that they can implement right away. So I'll leave them with that ebook link, as well as I want to offer anyone who's listening a free counseling session with our team. Our interns are phenomenal, fully supervised, very passionate about psychology, about anxiety reduction, and they are here to support. So people can have a customized plan to manage their anxiety with our helping professionals.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Aditi. Really, really a pleasure to talk with you today. And we'll put all your links on the page with your video so that people can find you easily. And it was a wonderful to have you. I've learned some things here today.
Thanks for inviting me. Take care, Laura. Pleasure.
Very welcome. Bye-bye now.